Episode number 203 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about how to balance intuition and logical realism when it comes to your fertility journey. So there are a lot of different opinions and different ways to approach things when you're going through this. And you may have a part of yourself that says, well, I just want to be realistic. I want to know all the facts and I want to know what I should do. Plain and simple. On the other hand, you might feel like I also want to feel connected to my intuition. At what point do I listen to the intuition? And will relying on that make me not realistic on my journey? So today I'm going to be talking about that topic. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So picture this, and it may not be hard to picture this because you may be going through that as we speak, but picture going to a reproductive endocrinologist or an OB after trying to conceive for either 6 months to a year and not being able to. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor runs some tests and asks you a bunch of questions and does an ultrasound, an HSG, all the things, the basic things to figure out what's going on, and ultimately comes back and says, you know what, you have very low ovarian reserve, you're probably not going to get pregnant on your own, and you're going to need help or some kind of ART. So whether it's IUI or IVF, consider doing that. And somewhere inside of you, you think to yourself, well, I'm not really sure I 100% agree. I do feel like there might be other options for me. But then you have almost this like war going on inside your head where part of you wants to follow that feeling. And then the other part of you says, well, if I follow that feeling, am I really being realistic? I should probably listen to this doctor who has a lot of experience. So what do? When do you listen to that intuition that you have, that calling, that inner knowing? And when do you ignore it? Or should you ignore it? And how do you differentiate between the two? Like what do you give more importance? Because sometimes you do have those two voices within yourself that starts to get conflicted. And then when you leave the doctor, you feel really depleted and you feel really confused. So how do you separate the two? I mean, this is a huge thing and that I hear a lot from my patients, my clients, that they go through because it's very confusing. You have like your own knowing, but then you're getting a lot of information. What happens is sometimes when you get a lot of information, you leave more confused than you started. You start out at least having some ideas or a little more space in the process, even though you're feeling disappointment. But then when you get all these answers and then different options, it's confusing because you don't know which to choose. You're suddenly finding yourself in a point where you have to choose. And that can be really, really confusing. So I want to talk about the importance of intuition. I talk about this a lot on my podcast, but there's also importance in finding out what's going on and being realistic. So getting the tests done, absolutely, no doubt, is a must when you're going through fertility challenges. You just want to make sure that everything's clear, and you also want to know what's going on. And luckily, we have technology and we have great medicine and we have science that's able to give us information about our bodies, and it's wonderful. It does have its drawbacks, however, because every medicine has its own tools, it has its own toolbox, it has its own tests, and it also has its own definitions. But those definitions are limited, and also the conclusions that they draw are also limited because they only have a snapshot in time, which are the labs. So they basically can take labs, get information, it's a snapshot, and then what happens is ultimately the doctor makes a conclusion based off of that information. Now, even though it's great information, what I found over time is that it's not an end-all, be-all. And a lot of times people will conclude things that don't end up being really what happens, and conclude, I mean predict for their patients things that don't end up happening. And the reason they don't is because the patient doesn't really follow or feel aligned with what the doctor said, and ultimately ends up doing something different or trying naturally. And I've had those patients, and I've seen them go and get told that they weren't able to conceive on their own, or they couldn't even use their own eggs. And that is not to say that no matter what your choice is, if you're choosing egg donor, there's nothing wrong with anything. But for those particular patients, they just didn't feel aligned with what they were told. So I just want to state that from the beginning, there is no right or wrong to the journey. There's no right or wrong for adoption. There's no right or wrong for anything people choose. But for these particular patients, they just did not feel aligned with what they were told, or at least what they found to be limitations in what the doctors were telling them. And some people ended up going to other doctors and getting a second opinion and a third opinion. And sometimes those other doctors had very differing opinions to the opinions that they did not feel aligned with. So that is one really good solution to feeling confused, is getting consultations from multiple doctors. And I don't think I guess maybe some places do charge and some places don't. So there's not a lot lost, even if they do charge, because it's not like a ton of money. It's just a consultation. You're just starting out and gathering information. And at that point, you have tests that you can show other doctors that you've already done. So a lot of people nowadays have access. They can go online on their portals and get their tests and then share it with other doctors. So it's really easy to go share your tests, get a second opinion, and talk to other people, because everybody's going to have a different opinion. It just is always that way. I mean, many people may be there might be overlap, and maybe the majority has one type of opinion, but it's important to get a lot of different opinions. And sometimes you may even want to, once you've really done the Western medicine thing, the conventional medicine, you may want to go and speak to other practitioners as well, such as like myself, a Chinese medicine practitioner, a fertility health coach, or a naturopathic medicine doctor, many different ones, or a nutritionist, just to get different ideas, because then you'll get a different perspective. And also they look at things a little differently, and they have a different way of viewing the body based on what they see. And also you definitely want to find somebody, even if it's alternative medicine, that really specializes in fertility, because they're going to have experience with a lot of other patients, which also shows them how things can end up. So people who have a lot of experience with fertility health know how things end up. And they're not just like, oh, well, I learned this at school and I'm hopeful that this should work. I do general acupuncture, for example, somebody who does general acupuncture, and they're hopeful because that's what they learn in their textbook. I mean, yeah, it's probably helpful to some degree, but they're not going to know how things turn out and how people really respond. And what I know for myself is, from seeing that, I actually have really great stories of people that had everything going against them medically, or what was quote unquote like seen that way, like autoimmune conditions, for example, people that were told that there's no way that they could do things naturally. And I've seen it with my own eyes, my own experience, that it actually can be done. So I think that when people work with a specific type of niche, they understand that things can be done. because they have many stories and many people and experience to look from as an example of how things can end up. So it's important to get lots of different perspectives. That's number one. So I would say balancing intuition and logic and realism, it's all about really using both. So ignoring one completely and just using intuition and saying, I just want to do this on my own, I'm just going to follow my gut and I'm not going to go get tested, or I'm not going to get ideas and I don't want to hear what they have to say. That's one extreme. And the other extreme, honestly, is to not listen to that intuition at all and give 100% of your power to the authority, letting you know or telling you that's something that you basically don't have hope, when you know deep inside that you do, or at least that's what your heart is telling you. And then you completely shut that out and listen to just one opinion. That's another extreme. So balancing the two, really not leaving any stones unturned, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, however you want to say it, doing the tests, talking to doctors, and then getting different opinions from different perspectives, I think is really important. Because when you do that, you're also breaking up sort of like the psyche of just sticking to one psyche, which is the person, and that's the opinion. And when you're talking to different people, you will almost by osmosis get a feel as you're going through this with other people. You'll start to get a better feel of really what fertility health is and like what options you have. And once you do that, it's almost like driving a car when you're looking, and I know it's nothing like buying a car, but when you're trying something new and you're researching, the more you get into it, the better of a feel you have towards it. And then you're going to start to feel like you're resonating with something over another. And ultimately, that's the intuition. And I definitely suggest not to leave that off the table. It's a huge asset. It's something real. We have it. It's an intelligence that's within you that tells you whether something's right or not. And as an acupuncturist, I can tell you without a doubt, I have seen multiple times where people knew something was off, and they kept pushing, and the doctor said, nothing's off, you're fine, whether it was like thyroid and they didn't check enough, or there was something off and they felt it. And they kept pushing, or even a cyst that they can't see with their eye. They knew something was off and they kept pushing for screening. And they were met with resistance. And that intuition actually got them to keep looking and looking and looking. And they either got their existing doctor to bend and go ahead and get those tests, or they got another doctor who was willing to help them out. And they ended up finding that they were right, that they intuitively knew something was off in their body and they were right. So if you're listening to this right now and it's resonating and there's something that you feel like, I know that something's off and I really want to learn what this is, and then you're kind of met with almost, not exactly, but it does happen. Oh, it's in your head. It's in your mind. Maybe you're just stressed or anxious, that kind of thing. It's probably nothing, but you feel that something's off. Listen to that intuition. So that is where utilizing your intuition can really help. And in some cases, it's saved lives. Obviously, with fertility health, it's not necessarily a life and death thing, but I have seen it save lives, just different stories that I've heard. And it is really important to listen to that intuition. That intuition's real. I've seen it be real and I've seen it be right. And it's really important to be guided. So, these are the things that you want to think about, and you want to look at it holistically. And that's really what holistically means. It means that you're not looking at it from one angle, because life is a variety. It's a gradient. It's not a black and white. So it's important, any approach that you're having, whether it's your health or your life, to look at all the different angles and to really approach it holistically, so that you're listening to the intuition, but you're not just relying on that. You're also relying on your logic. You're also relying on reality, but listening to your intuition as well, because that can guide you to things that you may have not thought about or presented with. So definitely important to use both. And another frequent question that I get actually is, how do you know the difference between overthinking or your intuition? Because sometimes you're like, well, what is the intuition? What does that mean when I feel an intuitive calling? And that's a very good question. And overthinking tends to be something that will bounce from one thought to the next thought and to the other thought, or it's not like something that just comes to you. Where intuition, and this happens a lot when I'm meditating, if I clear my mind, it actually is a little more spontaneous, and it feels like that thought or feeling lands on you. So it's not like you are the one that made it come up. It comes to you. It almost comes to you. It's almost like something that you receive versus throw. So it's like if you're throwing a ball, or if you're the one who's like kind of doing the thing, it's not like that. It's almost like it just lands towards you, and it's spontaneous. So you could be sitting with a person and then they mention something that really helped them, and something within your body, almost like a lot of times people feel it within their bodies, responds really strongly to it. And then you find out that this is something that can really help, or you feel really aligned with. That's typically an intuitive feeling. People feel it also when they meet their soulmates or people that they end up marrying. There's this kind of feeling of familiarity. It's just this intuition where they just feel like good and right and at home with whatever it is. So sometimes you can rack your brain trying to figure out answers, and you feel more confused, and you start to feel almost like uncentered. And that's when you know you're kind of missing the mark. You shouldn't feel that way. And I'm not saying that you feel perfect when you do have an intuition, but you feel more at home, an ease and calm within you. Like, that feels right to me. Like, this is the right decision. And I know people that have actually decided to do IVF, and once they found the right doctor, they felt like, okay, I feel really calm. I feel at ease. I have peace of mind because I know that I'm making the right decision. And once they make that decision, it feels more grounding to them. So that definitely I find to be a real marker of like, okay, this is something that feels aligned to me. And that is your guidance. It's kind of your inner compass, so to speak. So having those things and those kind of feelings could definitely help. One thing for sure is that you could definitely strengthen your instrument for intuition. And by meditating, you will really strengthen it, because meditation, you're training your mind to be in a state of receptivity and listening. Whereas most of the time, if we're just reacting to life and doing whatever we're doing, we are away from that. We're kind of just reacting to whatever's being thrown at us. And we're only reacting to the material world that's outside of us. We're not really in tune with the internal world. The only way we can get in tune with that internal world, which is where our intuition lives, is when we meditate, when we go inside. And we don't have to always sit in meditation. Sometimes we could just observe our state of mind. Just take a moment to observe and listen to what's happening within us. It could be just watching our own thoughts, watching how we feel, or it could be watching your body, just becoming aware of the sensations. Where am I holding tension? What am I doing? And some really great ways to do that, or prompts, is just asking yourself the question, what am I feeling right now? How am I breathing? What is my breath like? So just asking yourself that question with curiosity, just a witness, watching, no judgment. That's how you can start slowly training your mind if it's hard for you to just go right into meditation. So that is a really powerful way. Another way is journaling, because when you journal, sometimes you can also release a lot of those extraneous thoughts that just keep going around in circles in your head. Just get it out on paper. And it's almost like this purging, mental purging and catharsis that happens when you're journaling. Something that I have talked about in the past, which I love, it's called The Morning Pages. It's from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. Amazing book. I highly suggest it regardless if you want to be an artist or not, because some of the things that she talks about, I think can help with anything. And she actually believes that we are all born creative, that there's no such thing as like an artist per se. And also creativity is in the second chakra, which is exactly where our womb is. So the womb is in the second chakra because that's the creativity of the physical body. So the physical conception is really conceiving a baby. And the mental conception is where we have creativity. That's like more of our mental, and then spiritual, that's really where we're receiving lots of intuitive hits. We're getting into that space of creativity. So she talks about doing these things called morning pages. So 3 pages in the morning, as close to when you wake up as possible. It could be like with your morning tea or your normal morning routine. You could even take it with you right after you brush your teeth, just a notepad to write 3 pages, and it could be anything. Even if you get stuck, you can say, I'm stuck, I don't know what to write. You can write 3 pages of that. And what that does is it actually releases some of that mental stagnation. And once that mental stagnation goes, then you're able to really be in a place of creation and creativity, because that's when you clean out the clutter that gets in the way. You can also call it mental blocks. And that comes out, it gets released, and then you're able to flow, like get into the state of flow mentally. And ultimately that helps intuition as well, because you're just like releasing all of that. That's where ideas come about. And it's really important to use our creative function, because that is what's going to help you make decisions. So creativity is an important asset that we need in life, because that is how we solve problems. And creativity is not just about painting a beautiful painting. That's just one aspect of creativity. But creativity is something that we wouldn't be able to survive without, because we have to adapt, and we use our creative minds to adapt and pivot and problem solve. So ultimately, it really is about balancing our realism and realizing what can I work on, what can I look at, and uncovering what's going on. But it's also getting in touch with that intuition. I do think too, when you get to the state of receptivity, when you are getting in touch with that intuition, you're also getting in touch with this intelligence within you that's going to guide you more likely to what will actually help you. So it's an important aspect of it. It's an important part of the equation. But like I said, we need both. We need both of that, the balance of reality and also intuition, to work together and harmonize, just like the yin and the yang. So I hope that is some good food for thought, good food for intuition, and that you're getting something out of this, and it spoke to you on a specific level, because I do believe that sometimes you hear things for a reason and there's no accidents. So if this does speak to you, I'm happy, and thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope you have a beautiful day. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.